Okay, so we're here with Andrew Giacomazzi, also known as Andy, who is the Dean of the School of Public Service and a professor in our criminal justice program. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Steph. How are you?
I'm good. We were talking just before we started the recording, but it's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in criminal justice, how you ended up being a dean.
Well, great. That's a long story. Criminal justice has just been in my family for forever. My dad was a correctional officer. His dad was a justice of the peace in Soledad, California, where they have a maximum security prison where my dad worked. Aunts and uncles, probation officers. I think it was destiny that I was going to be involved in criminal justice in some way. I was actually interested in becoming a police officer after my undergraduate studies, and I couldn't pass a vision test. So there was that. So I went to grad school, got a master's degree in criminal justice, PhD in political science, kind of combined the two, worked a lot on public administration and organizational change, and just really gravitated toward the field of policing as kind of my specialty area in criminal justice, and even more specifically than that, police reform and organizational change. And so I kind of bypassed a career in policing in favor of a career in teaching and in leadership and administration now. And so I guess the lesson, I think, for some students too is to be thinking about just letting these experiences happen, and don't necessarily plan everything out and have this very linear path in terms of exactly what you're going to do. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and it took a turn in a different direction. I'm actually really, really happy that it did. Got my first job out of graduate school over at Washington State, go Cougs. Over at UT El Paso, spent a few years there, came to Boise State, wanted to always get to Idaho. I had heard about this university called Boise State in the great state of Iowa, or Idaho, I guess, although I wasn't quite sure where it was. And had a chance to get the first assistant professor job in our criminal justice master's program. And so I was the initial graduate coordinator, so got a little bit of leadership experience already in my first year here at Boise State. And then, I don't know, it's either I can't really hold a job, or it's kind of a matter of I like to try new things. So I went from graduate director, coordinator for the master's program, to chair, to associate dean, to now interim dean for the School of Public Service. No grand plan to get into administration and leadership. That was not what my goal was 20 years ago. It was really gravitating toward teaching. I still get to do a lot of teaching. I teach a class in the spring. I teach a class in the summer, even with an administrative position. And so I really enjoy that balance. Get to do a little bit of research still, although not as much as what I was doing before getting into the dean's office in 2013, but I get to dabble a little bit in that, as well as work with a great team of individuals, faculty, staff, and students in the School of Public Service as the interim dean for a little bit here. Who knows how long? We'll see. And that's the way I roll. Doesn't necessarily matter if we do a permanent dean search in a year or a couple of years or tomorrow. I'll just kind of roll with it and see where things take me.
That's great. Well, we're in good hands with you at the helm there, Andy. And Andy and I share a degree from the same place, the same department, and the same mentor in Nick Loveridge. So
Absolutely. And
absolutely.
Nick Lovers has played a huge part in my interest in policing, police reform, organizational change, and the great work that he's been involved with over at Washington State, and really in a 5-state region in terms of what police departments have been doing over the last 20, actually now close to 30 years in terms of trying to improve performance. And of course, with recent events going on around the world today, this has really come back into the forefront, even though some of our early work, the work that I worked on with Nick Leverage back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, kind of lay dormant for a while. And all of a sudden we're kind of seeing some things resurrecting in a really positive way. I think there's some great hope for positive change in policing these days.
Well, let's go back and get at sort of the beginning of that academic trail and tell us what community-oriented policing is, COP, and why that was interesting to you.
Yeah, it's very interesting in the sense that my personal journey with this really, again, just like my journey into administration, is just kind of, taking advantage of some opportunities. So as a graduate student at Washington State, I came in, I got a phone call prior to that from a professor in the criminal justice department. I was working at Sears in Southern California at the time, waiting for that phone call that would say, hey, you've got an assistantship. And of course, we're all looking for assistantships that'll help pay for tuition and fees and get us a little stipend, get us to work with professors. And in this case, Dr. Quint Thurman over at Washington State called me and said, you had a half-time research assistant position at Washington State, would like you to come, and I want you to work on my grant. And that grant was an organizational change grant where the Spokane, Washington Police Department was in the early 1990s trying to transform itself from a more traditional law enforcement department into one that was more community oriented. Now, keep in mind that some of the first research articles and books on community policing were actually written just a year or two prior to when I got that phone call. So we were still trying to figure out what exactly community policing is. And to this day, there are many definitions of what community policing, or COP as you called it, really is. What I like to think of when I think of community policing is really three things. It's about partnerships, police, community, any external stakeholder partnerships. It's about problem solving, which is huge in policing, because for most of our history, policing is not about problem solving. It's about responding from incident to incident to incident and being very reactive. So thinking about reorienting policing toward collaborative problem solving in partnership with external stakeholders, just that sentence is saying a heck of a lot, because that is not how traditionally policing has operated. It has operated in a very insular way, in a very closed model, very little interaction with the external environment, other than if you or me or anyone else is going to be the recipient of law enforcement services. And in policing, there are very few agencies where being the recipient of a service is unwanted. Typically, we want to be recipients of good service, and ask yourself, when's the last time you really wanted that parking ticket or that speeding ticket? And then number three, in terms of how I characterize community policing, is organizational change. And that's a biggie. That's a real big one in policing, because again, our police tradition has been, hey, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And so this idea of wholesale organizational change, rethinking the philosophy of what policing is all about and what police officers do and how they interact with the community, it has been the sticking point over the 30 years of its existence. Real tough stuff, especially when you're talking about police officers who, like myself, may have come from a law enforcement family, and they have their own notions of, they've heard the stories of what policing is like from moms, from dads, from aunts, uncles. And so a lot of people are attracted to policing, maybe for the wrong reasons. And so part of this organizational change piece to do policing right, at least for some, is to be really thinking about, what are the kinds of individuals who we're recruiting into the policing profession these days to make a community policing philosophy, a mindset actually work. Again, hard, because in a system of federalism, in a system of local autonomy. Every police department looks a little bit different. Some of the common things that we've seen in policing are how they recruit and select their police officers. In many of those agencies across the country, whether we're talking about local city government or county government, state policing, tend to want to go with an individual who is more of the warrior mentality, more of the aggressive personality for just in case. Because when we think of policing, we think of law enforcement, we think of all the stuff that the media tends to present to us in terms of what law enforcement actually is. Watch any episode of Cops. Cops has been running for 30 something years. And every episode, every segment within an episode is a law enforcement episode, which really distorts the reality of policing, which tends to be actually much more service or maintenance oriented, but it attracts individuals who tend to have that more warrior mentality. In community policing, what we're doing is we're acknowledging the fact that policing really is a combination of things. It's a public service agency that certainly has law enforcement as a component. But if you look at the calls for service that come into any particular agency at any one time, you'll see that most of those calls are more service or order maintenance oriented. They're not really law enforcement oriented, despite the fact that we pulled in people into policing who have more of a warrior or more aggressive personality. So part of community policing is trying to fix that recruiting problem and getting agencies to think more holistically about, if community policing is going to work over the long term, you might want to start with who are the kinds of individuals that you are taking into the organization and hiring. Probably that would be more of a guardian mentality, someone who has more of a service orientation. And there's kind of an adage on this whole idea, which is that it is very difficult to take the aggressiveness out of a warrior, but it is not so hard to teach a guardian to be aggressive during those few times when aggressiveness is actually needed. Again, the problem is we have 100+ years of tradition of thinking of policing one particular way and recruiting a type of person that all of a sudden we're saying, hey, you know what, let's rethink this and let's go with more of, a guardian approach. And that's just recruitment as one piece of organizational change. As you know, Steph, I mean, when we talk about change in organizations, we're talking about, mission, vision, goals, internal structure, external constituencies, performance evaluation, recruiting, hiring. The list goes on and on and on in terms of the change that is necessary to really bring community policing to its fruition. So it's no wonder that after 30 years, some agencies have done a good job with this. Others just kind of have failed miserably because the challenge is too great. I think we're at a moment in time here where I think a lot of agencies who may have initially failed and have not really kind of kept up with, the pace of moving toward community policing, may be motivated a little bit more now to rethink that and to really put in the effort, because we simply need wholesale change in policing. It's a foregone conclusion that there are problems in our policing system. And again, community policing is not the cure-all. It's not the panacea, but it's one way to think about police reform in 2020.
I don't follow policing literature, as you know, but I've often wondered if some of the changes, this has to do with federalism after 9/11, where we started to allow and encourage local law enforcement organizations to receive surplus military gear, and the tanks, the riot gear, the automatic machine guns and all that kind of stuff. So now even a small town police force looks like they could be in Basra or something in a moment. It seems like it would be harder to enact that community-oriented policing if you're dressing up all the time like you're about to invade another country. Am I wrong in that?
Well, so what you're saying is that if we start driving tanks through neighborhoods, that's not going to build bridges between the police and the public?
Well,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's a problem there. There is definitely some cognitive dissonance going on between, the militarization of local police departments since 9/11 and what I just spent the last 10 minutes talking about. And the good news is that we are actually seeing many local agencies pulling back a little bit on that over the last 10 years or so. Your point that you just made, Steph, it is coming in loud and clear. It is a definite perception problem, and we're seeing agencies scale back on the use of tanks. I mean, we have, in some ways, court cases that are essentially establishing precedent that, hey, you know what, if you get a call that there is suspected drug dealing at a particular house, you are not allowed to take a Bradley armored vehicle and poke a hole in somebody's house in the process of executing a search warrant. So some of that's been helped by court cases, and some of this has been helped by progressive law enforcement leaders saying, wait a minute, okay, yeah, we're trying to make inroads into the community. We're trying to do collaborative problem solving partnerships, go from incident driven policing to more problem oriented. And we have an arsenal of weapons and tanks. Now, don't get me wrong. There are instances when that kind of equipment is actually needed in policing, but it's in very specific instances, and even in large cities, it is not used very often. So it's very, very difficult for me to believe that, the Nampa, Idaho Police Department needs multiple tanks, right? Instead, what we've done is scaled back here in our local area, and we have now SWAT task forces that are multi-agency. So not every agency has a tank in the weaponry. We have collaborations, which is in the spirit, by the way, of community policing. We have collaborations among multiple agencies so that when these atypical incidents do occur, we've got an interagency task force to deal with it. Not every department has the equipment that we put on the side for just in case. It is completely intimidating, and it is completely not within the spirit of community policing and problem solving initiatives. That's for sure.
yeah, one of the hardest things I think that the giant questions that we think about in MPA programs and in criminal justice programs is how do we change an organization? It's hard enough to change directors. It's hard enough to change a little bit about recruitment, but is there an example where from the top down, the agency embraced community policing and was able to change all those parts? All the moving parts have to change, as you said, the recruitment and hiring, the retention, the training, the performance evaluations, the compensation packages,
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
Have you seen a successful community policing organization?
Well, yes, absolutely. But I wouldn't say that I know of any department that is on that holistic level. When you think of all the concentric circles with, with mission and vision in the very center, and everything in kind of a spider web spinning out from there. That's always going to be a work in progress with an organization. I think, the successful departments that have gone from a more traditional law enforcement reactive department into one that is more successful and more effective have progressive leaders who really don't just give lip service to problem solving, but really believe in it. And also are not the leaders who embrace simplistic solutions to complex problems. We see this quite a bit in policing. Oh, body cams are going to solve our problems, right? What about a training program that gets at implicit bias training? Now, nothing wrong with implicit bias training, but that's one piece of the training puzzle that goes into this wholesale change in policing. So when police leaders recognize that this is not an overnight kind of change, that this is years in the making, and that they need to celebrate small successes and really become what a lot of people call learning organizations, right? We need police departments to embrace this idea of constant quality improvement, to collect data, to look at themselves in a critical way, to allow the external constituencies, their customers, to provide meaningful input and learn from it, and have learning organizations as its primary operating philosophy. Then we start really making, over time, through incremental change, progress in this area. I would say the other thing too is that what I've noticed over the years is that the police departments and sheriff's offices that tend to do better than others in community policing are within governmental structures, either city or county governmental structures, that also embrace kind of a community-oriented approach themselves, that are really into constant quality improvement and customer service, and really valuing responsiveness over efficiency. And so when police departments exist kind of on their own within a larger structure that does not support what it is that they're doing, we tend to see more failure there than in these larger entities that are really looking at the same issues, trying to provide quality customer service in a different way, being innovative and being unique at that larger level as well.
Now, this may relate to what you just said. I'm not sure. You know, across the country, we see that many police departments answer to a commission, a police commission that doesn't really answer to the mayor or the city council. Whereas, say, here in Boise, our police chief reports directly to the mayor and to the council. Is that a problem in ensuring responsiveness? That, you know, if I'm assuming a police commission is more captured by that traditional understanding of what departments do and more insulated from the rest of
Yes.
the government. Yes. Okay.
Yes, I don't have a long-winded answer. Sorry, I know I'm a professor on that one, but yes, we see that a police chief that is closer to being accountable to the people of that jurisdiction, that tends to instill positive, innovative change better than in other systems as well. And keep in mind as well that although this wasn't your question, we have a number of forms of police accountability, whether those are citizen police panels, whether those are, we had for years here in Boise, Idaho, an ombudsman system, an independent individual who was, keeping tabs of citizen concerns about policing. Here in Boise, for example, the number one complaint was not about excessive use of force, as is the case in some other jurisdictions. It was more about police acting rudely. And, that's an important, really important piece. And I bring that up for a specific reason, because going back now to, and everything goes back to our mentor, Dr. Nicholas Loveridge. One of the things that Dr. Loveridge found years ago that I still use in my research and when I talk to police departments is a 5-scale normed average among a number of police departments in the Western United States. And one of the things that we know is that an individual's general view of policing and their specific police department is highly dependent upon the quality of their very last interaction with a police officer. And so now go back to the complaints that we had seen over the years in Boise, Idaho with the ombudsman, tying that back into community policing ideas. You can't get citizens to work with police if police are coming off in a way that makes citizens feel like they're being demeaned or they're being humiliated. A lot of people would look and they go, oh, okay, well, great. Boise, Idaho doesn't have a lot of use of force complaints. It's more about rudeness. I would say that is actually a big problem, Because if the Boise Police Department, if the Ada County Sheriff's Office, if any of our local police departments truly wants to make additional inroads to transforming into a community policing department, you need, by definition, you need your external partners, your external environment to interact with you in different ways. We know from years and years of research that cops on their own are very ineffective crime fighters. You know, if you look at clearance rates, for example, for burglary, so very common crime, thank goodness here in the Treasure Valley, that is our number one crime. It's not violent, it's property crimes. And you look at that and you ask somebody, okay, so, you know, you come home from a, you know, nice weekend trip in McCall, Idaho, and you notice, oh, somebody was in your apartment, somebody was in your dorm room, somebody was in your house, and some things were stolen. You call the police. You get, you know, depending upon how busy the night is, you're going to get a response that's either they're going to be there in half an hour, they may be there in 6 hours, they may be there the next day, whatever. Police officer comes in, they take a police report, and then the question is, am I ever going to get my back? Am I ever going to get my stuff back? Is there ever going to be an arrest? Well, we know from here locally, for victims of our most common type crimes, property crimes, that there is about a 12% chance that an arrest will ever be made for the person that violated, you know, your space and took your stuff. Spin that around. 88% chance that no one will ever be arrested and you will ever get anything back that was stolen, right? So we know that cops by themselves, despite the fact that we have 100 years of saying police are the crime fighting experts, they're specifically trained, they drive fast cars, they you know, get the lights and the sign, they're not very good by themselves at solving crimes. I don't mean to be flippant about that. That is not an indictment on police. That is just national statistics. The national clearance rate here locally is about what it is. Sorry, the local clearance rate for burglaries here is about the same as it is nationally. It's about 12 to 14%. We're not very good crime fighters on the most common call that comes in on crime. But you add the citizen component, you add Crime Stoppers, you add neighborhood watch programs, you add that collaboration, all of a sudden, you know, and I don't mean this to sound simple, but you start doing community policing initiatives that are trying to get neighbors within communities to interact a little bit more with each other, to get to know one another, right? This sounds really hokey, but the idea is somebody will, if they're paying attention, see that person that really shouldn't be in your house. And we have now a citizen police collaboration that is much better than just police on their own saying, just the facts, ma'am. I just want the facts. I know you're so emotional about, you know, this burglary in your, but I just need the facts because honestly, I'm never going to be able to solve this crime anyway, but I need the facts so that I can get off and do something that really is exciting to me, like real crime, because that's why I got into policing, to fight real crime. I want to be able to put my lights and siren on. Again, don't mean to be flippant, but I'm trying to do just a little bit of an exaggerated a way of illustrating not only the importance of community policing, but how difficult it is to really instill that kind of organizational change if you've got individuals in policing for the wrong reasons. We need more guardians. One of the things that I'm a big advocate for, by the way, in recruiting, is really for police departments to do profiles. Do profiles on your most successful officers. Ask the public, ask internally, look at performance reviews. Who are your most successful people, right? And what are their characteristics? And start kind of working backwards on developing a profile for an ideal police officer and start changing your recruitment and selection procedures based on that. The problem these days, Steph, is something that's actually, you know, is very problematic. We have a lot of individuals in law enforcement who are retiring right now, and the pools of individuals who are interested in policing are going down. And so it is difficult now to really do what I am suggesting, which is we got to be picking and choosing a little bit more based on different criteria when I'll tell you, my student group at Boise State 10 years ago, we did the testing, the physical and written testing for the Boise Police Department, and we would get on any given Saturday for the testing process anywhere from 300 to 400 police applicants. Fast forward 10 years, less than 100, less than 100. So again, trying to figure out what's going on there, and maybe individuals are just not interested in police work as they were before for a variety of reasons. Probably low pay has something to do with that. Probably perceptions of danger, although policing is not the most dangerous profession if you're to look at it in terms of fatalities on the job, but okay. And maybe it's a little bit about what's going on, today as well, in terms of systemic racism in policing. And maybe that's not a profession that people want to get into for a variety of reasons. Maybe they feel they can't change that. And maybe they're genuinely afraid about being a cop these days, with what looks like public perception against them. Abolish the police, defund the police, and so forth. So multiple problems, no simple solutions. I wish I had the answers, but I do like rethinking community policing from 30 years ago and adding some new dimensions to that, adding some urgency to that, and thinking about those main principles of collaboration and partnerships, problem solving, and organizational change as one way to make inroads into effectively solving crimes, effectively improving the quality of life, especially in those neighborhoods that are most in need of effective responses to crime and disorder and fear of crime, and to really see if we might be able to begin to make inroads into communities that are largely individuals of color, and seeing if we can start turning things around in a way that's going to be a long-term process. But I think baby steps with community policing can make a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andy, for taking the time to talk with us. Enjoy the rest of the summer, I guess.
Absolutely.
And yeah, hope to see you and everyone else on campus live. And if not, I'll see you on Zoom. And take care.
Thank you so much, Steph. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye-bye.